When you can see yourself in somebody that's doing something you want to do, that makes you feel more empowered to be able to do it. And so I think it's important that we have representation of women and all kinds of women, not just women that can walk and talk like the guys, but also are like really feminine women, and just so that every young woman can see themselves in a leader, right? And realize that they too can do it, and that their voice matters big time. If we as women aren't using our voices and we're not sharing our perspective as a woman, then decisions are going to be made that may affect us in less than desirable ways.
Welcome to Fem Forte, a podcast where we celebrate women in music and performing arts. I'm your host, Amanda DeFries. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. On this episode, I am joined by Paulette Tomlinson. Paulette currently serves as the Director of Fine Arts at Tomball ISD. We talk about the importance of art advocacy at the state and national level and how it affects the future of fine arts public education. I had such a wonderful time talking with Paulette, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Fem Forte. Today is a very exciting day. Today, we are here at Team EA in San Antonio, Texas. It is a full circle moment. I am so excited to bring on Paulette Tomlinson. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. I'm so excited to just roll into all these questions. As you know, in our conversation earlier, this is full circle for me because I know I introduced myself to you at the Women in Leadership session last year at Team EA, and I was so amped. And at that time, we recorded the very first episodes of Fem Forte, so to see kind of me just pitching out the podcast when it was barely anything to see where it's grown now, it has been such an amazing experience.
Yes, that's amazing. Congratulations. I'm excited to be a part of this special day with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been such an amazing journey, and I'm just so excited to get right into it. So
right.
I obviously know who you are, but go ahead and tell our listeners kind of who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about your background.
Okay. So my name is Paulette Tomlinson. I am currently the Director of Fine Arts at Tomball ISD. I've also been a Director of Fine Arts at Flower Bluff ISD down in Corpus Christi and at Nacogdoches ISD in East Texas. And before that, I was band director for 10 years. And so I taught band a little bit in Texas, some in Florida, and a little bit in South Carolina. So I got my start. I was a student in Marietta, Georgia, as a high school student. I went to Lassiter High School, really lucky. My parents kind of, won the lottery with picking the right school for me because I had a really great band experience that made me want to just do it forever. I never wanted to stop. So I grew up there, went to Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina for my bachelor's degree. And it lit the fire, got my first job out of school, loved it, got my master's degree at Florida State while I was teaching in Florida, and then finally made my way to Texas. And now I'm so excited because I feel like this is the spot I belong in. Fine Arts Administration came along and just was kind of an unexpected thing, an unexpected opportunity that when I got in, I found my people. I found this was my calling. This is the thing that my skill set was made for. And I'm loving it. I feel like I'm literally living the dream. No like sarcasm intended.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that because we all know kind of the journey of why people go into teaching specifically, but what made you want to pivot towards fine arts administration?
Yeah. So in South Carolina, I was in a school district that had a fine arts administrator, and I was a really young teacher at that point. So I didn't quite know, was barely, getting through. I think it was my second year teaching, so we were struggling. But she was really cool. And I always thought that what she did was neat because she got to have a little taste of everything. It was dance, it was art, it was music, theater, and just her leadership and her vision for what we were doing and making sure that like what we were providing for our students matched what our students needed. I thought I just had a whole lot of respect for her. And then, I moved on to Florida, and there wasn't a fine arts administrator in my school district. And so I kind of forgot about it. I kind of forgot it was a thing. And so when I got to Texas and I was teaching, my first year in Texas, I was teaching about 50 miles from where I lived. And I loved it, loved my kids. We had lots of fun. I learned how to do military marching band. So that was a journey. But it was great. That's a lot of respect for that activity. But a position came open at Nacogdoches ISD for fine arts administrator. I met the qualifications and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember how cool I thought Nancy was, another female leader, and how neat how I had thought about once I met her and saw what she did, considered doing an arts administration master's degree. And my master's degree is in music education. But, and it kind of rekindled some of those old feelings of that would be neat. And so I was like, you know what the heck? I'm going to put my name in and see what happens. Did not expect anything at all. And I got the call, took the interview, and then they offered me the job. And so it kind of, sometimes I tell people I lucked into it or it was thrust upon me, and it just kind of happened because that took my commute down from, 50 miles a day or 100 miles round trip a day to 2 miles. And so that was, a convenience for my family and everything, but just an exciting opportunity, right place, right time, hashtag blessed. I don't know. But no, it was great. As soon as I got in there and I realized the impact that I could make for kids on a much bigger scale than I could in my classroom. I miss the kids. I miss the relationships that you build with kids and getting to make music with them every day. I miss it every day. Every time I walk into a classroom, it makes my heart, hurt a little bit. But the fact that I can impact thousands of kids daily and make sure that they're getting the equitable access to excellent fine arts opportunities that changed my life, that's not lost on me. And so it's being inspired by that every day, like that's what I caught the bug, and now I've got it, and I'm all in. This is my spot. So yeah, a lot of people have different trajectories to get to fine arts administration. Some people will go through campus administration. Some people set out and say, I want to be a fine arts administrator, which I think is neat because I think they're seeing more, we're seeing more positions, and we're seeing people are able to see themselves in those roles better. But a lot of us, you just kind of jump into it from the classroom, and you're, there's not really a manual on how to be a fine arts director. But yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of different ways that you could go about it and get to this point. But yeah, I always tell people I lucked into it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool about how you got into it, because you don't hear about that like in too many places, or like those unique opportunities. I want to touch more into like the impact piece, because I'm sure being a fine arts director is not an easy task at all. I'm sure it involves so much and things, and that's why I really, really wanted to talk to you, just because from my perspective, obviously in previous episodes, I've talked to women band directors and heard a little bit more about what they do, but fine arts directing, at least from what I know, I don't know a lot about what it all entails.
To be honest, sometimes I don't either.
And so I guess more what you were saying earlier about the impact of the kids, knowing that it's a relatively difficult job, like what keeps you in it? What keeps you in, still being passionate about being a fine arts director, and what is the most fulfilling part about what you do? Like gets you up in the morning?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, to start, I work in a district that is extremely supportive of its students, and the passion that my colleagues have for educating the kids and educating the whole student and not just the tested aspects, that is inspiring to me. But I think when I walk into a concert and I see the work and the dedication of the students and their teachers, I have goosebumps right now thinking about it. It's when I have those moments like that where I sit back and I go, oh man, my job is really cool. I get to be part of this. And and the thing is what I love about being a fine arts director is, I taught band for 10 years. I did all the contests and, won the trophies and et cetera. And I think my favorite part about it is empowering other people to do that and setting them up to be able to have those awesome moments with their students and to give their students those amazing opportunities and those life-changing moments. I had a professor that called them the phenomenological moments because you can't really explain them, your goosebump moments. Anyway, but being able to set them up. So if that means I buy you a projector for your one-act play, or, I make sure I pay for this clinician to come out and work with you, or I, buy you a whole bunch of mats for your artwork. The things that I can do to kind of be like the best supporting actress, in this whole production that we've got as fine arts, that's the thing that keeps me going. I like to be their cheerleader. I took an interview, I interviewed a candidate for a job, and I guess they had followed our social media page, and she said, "You're like the proud mom." And I said, that's exactly what I am. I'm the proud mom. I'm their biggest cheerleader, and I get them what they need to be successful. And I love watching teachers who they're so inspiring because they teach their students, and I wish I could have been half the teacher they are. And it's just cool that I can be a little part of it, and I can help kind of guide the direction, because then I sit back. 2 weeks ago, we had our theater department at Tomball Memorial High School. They did the music band. And it was, well, I say the theater department, but it was the whole fine arts department. The choir was involved, the band was involved, the orchestra was involved. It was a huge production. And I was moved to tears at the end, just because it was all these kids, out doing this thing that they loved. You could feel the passion. They were tap dancing. It was incredible. And I'm sitting here, and the show sold out 4 times. The community is so supportive, and the school board is there. And it's just this great moment of celebration of our art form, what we do, fine arts. And it was one of those moments where I was like, man, my job is awesome, and so stuff like that, and yes, it is a hard job. That you wear many hats. You are the travel agent. You are the accountant. Sometimes you have to be the bad guy and say, no, I can't buy that for you, or no, you can't go on that trip. You are the hiring manager. You're the firing manager. You have to have the direction for the program, because there's not somebody else telling you. You have to be the one. And if something doesn't work, it's on you. That's because it was your idea and it didn't pan out. Lots of hats. Therapist. I pick up the phone a lot, and hey, it's going to be okay. You know what? Tomorrow's a new day. Let it go. Let's try again. And so it can be really thankless at times, because it's hard work, and sometimes there'll be days where everybody's frustrated with me because they don't like a decision I made, and that's okay. Because the next day we're all in it together, and what we're doing is what's best for kids. And so, yes, those little moments in between, and then knowing that at the end of the day, like when I look back a year from now, the growth that I'll have seen from the department, from our kids, and knowing that, we're providing things for kids, that's all I need, really. That's all I need. It's good stuff.
Yeah. And I want to touch more, because obviously, as you mentioned before, you come from a band experience or band background, and being a fine arts director doesn't mean you're just overseeing just the band department.
Exactly.
I'm sure, with choir and orchestra or theater, like you have to learn all these different mediums of where fine arts fits, especially in education. So was there a learning curve that you had to learn coming from a band background of the things that like choir needs or things that theater needs, and so on and so forth?
Absolutely. And still learning, because it's huge. Every arts discipline is so different and so incredible in its own right. And so what I tried to do in my first few years I picked one discipline that I was unfamiliar with, and I tried to immerse myself in it. So my first year, visual art was the thing that felt the farthest away from what I was comfortable with. And so I did things like, sat in the art classrooms, and sometimes I would sit in with the kids and ask them what they were doing, or talk to the art teachers. I volunteered to help. So art has something called VACE, which is like their solo and ensemble, UAL. And so it's called VACE, is Visual Art Scholastic Event. And what happens is the students take a piece of artwork. There are certain guidelines that they have to keep it in. And then they create it. They take it in front of a judge, and the judge gives them some feedback, and then they get a score. And so it's a lot like solo and ensemble. But I've volunteered to help host that event. And so I got to immerse myself in that event, see what the kids were doing, listen to what they were saying. I learned a lot about what judges are looking for in that event. And so that really helped me to kind of flex that art muscle. But my art teachers and our art students just constantly inspire me, because the stuff we had our rodeo art show a couple weeks ago, and just some of the things that the students created were just magical, breathtaking, amazing. And so still learning lots about that. Then the second year, I was a fine arts director. I decided I was going to do theater, because that was another thing. I had done band, choir. I taught choir for a couple years in South Carolina, so I have a little bit of knowledge of that, but knew nothing about theater. And so theater, I volunteered to drive their box truck for all their one-act play stuff. Yeah, so that was fun, because then I was always there. And theater kids are so brave, because they go to one-act play and they all have their part, kind of like we do in band, but they're all one on a part. You play your role, and if your role is the one that falls flat, like it's just you. It's not me in the flute section,
Yeah.
And so it is so cool to see the kids after one act play. They have a critique with their judge, and the judge will talk to them, and they'll look right at that kid and say, "Hey, you need to do this." And they just say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And they take their notes. Thank you so much. I will make sure and do that. And it's just magical to see, because I'm thinking, I'd be crumbling, crying, the amount of bravery that you have to just say, okay, yeah, great. Because the other thing I've learned about theater kids is when they take on a role, they really embody that. They feel that character's emotions and stuff. And so I could see how it could be so emotional if somebody is critiquing how you performed it, the way you decided to embody that character. So that was really neat. I learned a lot about that. And now that I'm in Tomball, I have a dance department. I started a dance department in Nacogdoches, but I never got to see it come to fruition because I left. I moved down to Kingsville to be near my husband. But now I have a full-fledged dance department, and so I'm learning from them this year. And they're so cool. What they are able to do, watching those students learn. I sat in and watched a dance rehearsal, and the way that they talk to one another and learn their choreography, and the way it's really collaborative between student and teacher. That was amazing. So I'm still learning about dance, but there's been a learning curve. But I think as long as you are humble enough to say, yeah, I have no idea, can you teach me? That helps a lot. And I've got great teacher leaders in each discipline who are always willing to explain things to me if I'm confused, or, make sure that I check myself before I wreck myself. They're good. So yeah, definitely a learning curve. And I think if I ever stop learning about it, then I probably should hang it up, right? Because it constantly evolves. But it's hard because band, and a lot of fine arts directors are former band directors, just because I think a little bit of the skill set of being able to manage a budget of the size, but it's cool because we're seeing a lot more fine arts directors from other disciplines come in. But it's hard. It's sometimes can be hard to not be biased towards your band friends, because that's what you know, and that's where you're comfortable. They're speaking your language. But I try to be very intentional about it, because I am a band person, and I always want all of my departments to feel equally supported and recognized by my office. So.
Yeah, no, and I think that's so cool, especially how you mentioned in areas that you are unfamiliar with, that you fully immerse yourself, like driving the box truck, and I think that shows the kind of leader that you are too. Because I think a lot of times, we know the typical servant leadership versus like more authoritarian leadership where they just make the shots, and I think it's really cool that you're not only getting another perspective by immersing yourself with the students and hearing their experiences and their thoughts, and instead of just kind of being on the sidelines and seeing the big picture. You're actually in there and can put yourselves kind of in their shoes in some ways. So I think that's really amazing, and I think that's awesome advice for people who want to get into this field.
Yeah, just jump in.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was your involvement with TAEC, which is the Texas Arts Education Campaign. Obviously, you all have a booth here at TMEA, and to be honest with you, I don't actually really know what that is. So can you even tell me a little bit about
I sure can.
What that organization is all about?
I love TAEC. So I'm about to get really nerdy and excited. Okay. So TAEC, the Texas Arts Education Campaign, it started as a collaboration between TMEA and the Texas Fine Arts Administrators, and it's has evolved, and we're really excited about its evolution. But basically, it's the legislative arm of what we all do in our organizations. And so it has evolved to include our dance organization, our theater organization, our visual art organization. So now all fine arts disciplines are represented by TAEC. And it's become this beautiful collaboration. And so what we do is we advocate at the state level, whether it's with the State Board of Education, the House and the Senate, Governor's Office, or any sort of state level power player for fine arts education. We advocate. And so I sounded like Yoda just then. But whether it's, we used to, there was a time, I think when I noticed TAC, when I got really interested in being part of it is, I want to say 2 legislative sessions ago, 87th legislative session. We have a legislative session every other year in Texas. So it would have been 3 years ago. There was a bill that was presented to allow a CTE course to take the place of a fine arts graduation requirement. And so TAEC got together, they testified at the Capitol against it, and ultimately that bill was struck down, which was great, because that would have hurt us big time in fine arts land. So I was really interested in that. I did a lot of what I could do in my own little purview to support that cause and that message. And so when I was asked to be on TAEC for the following legislative session, I was stoked. And so we actually are in a position now where we're taking more of an offensive stance. And so we advocated, we kind of thought about, what are the things that our teachers and our students need as far in the way of legislation for fine arts. And we talked about accountability was one thing. We talked about, teacher pay, and we talk about equity. You think about Allstate. There are some zip codes in Texas that aren't represented here right now, and we talked about equity and all these things that we wanted to be able to address. And so we decided that the thing that would help and touch all of it would be funding. And so we pushed forward a bill for weighted funding for fine arts education. And so basically, what would happen is, for every 6th through 12th grade student that's enrolled in a fine arts course, there would be a little chunk of money that would travel with that kid from the state to the school district. And that would incentivize the school district to increase their fine arts offerings. Every school district in Texas would get it. So even those ones that don't have fine arts, opportunities like Tomball ISD has, would have the means to maybe get that started and the incentive to get that started so that those kids aren't missing out on that. And then, that money could be spent on the K through 12 fine arts program all the way down, elementary school as well. And so we pushed it forward. We thought, we're dreaming really big. And then it passed. It was actually, so we had House Bill 3829 was the original bill. It was filed by James Tallarico. We love James Tallarico. And he's a former musical theater student, and he's in San Antonio. Super cool. But so that bill, kind of a baby bill, kind of small, and wasn't going to hold a whole lot of weight on its own. But then another House representative, Ken King from Canadian Texas, he had House Bill 100, which was a really big public school finance bill, and it was a great public school finance bill. It was going to, raise the basic allotment, so the funding for public schools was going to go up. There were lots of other things on it, but also they added our fine arts allotment to it. And then that passed the House almost unanimously. I can't remember the exact numbers, but only 2 people voted against it in the whole House. So it was awesome. We were really excited. Then, of course, after it passes the House, it has to go through the Senate. When it got to the Senate, it was still moving. It still had some weight behind it, and it was still going. But then the whole educational savings accounts, vouchers debate started. And so basically any sort of public school funding has been just, halted. And so nothing passed. And so ultimately it didn't pass, but we got the farthest that we've ever gotten. Yeah. And we're part of the conversation. And, they know we're coming now. We're excited. And so, we're going to gear up and we're going to try again. And, it's neat to know that, our lawmakers, those policymakers they know who fine arts are, and then they know who TAEC is. And they're like, we hear you, we're going to get it on there. And we've got, quotes from people that said they are going to, work to get it passed through for us eventually. And so we're going to hold them to it, Mm-hmm. So it's a neat organization. We do things like go to the state school board of education meetings. And if there's something that we feel like we need to have a fine arts voice on, we testify. And a lot of times, sometimes I kind of feel like fine arts Avengers, mm-hmm. Because people will come to us and say, hey, this is going on in my school district. How can I fix this? And so we try to help and say, hey, well, look at this board policy. And so it feels like almost, like this, another support organization, but this support organization impacts all of the students of Texas. And so it's just, I love everything about TAEC, and I love that I get to be involved in it and work with the kids. I think my favorite TAEC memory so far has been, we did a Capitol Day back in April of 23. So in the midst of the legislative session, and we took 150 students and teachers to the Capitol, and they were recognized in both the House and the Senate. And that was really neat because, we filled up a whole huge section, and kids were in costumes and their uniforms. And so the kids performed in the rotunda, they performed in the Capitol auditorium. And then I think the best part about it was the students were trained, and along with adults too, but they were trained on how to go in and speak to their House representative or their senator and advocate for this thing that they love so much. And so they spent a few hours visiting offices and telling them, how much fine arts means to them, the impact it's made on their life, and, encouraging them to support our bill and to support it, as it moves forward. And so that was a really neat day. There was lots of artwork. We made sure the whole public education committee got a piece of artwork for their office. and students presented artwork to different, people that helped us push our bill forward. And we've decided it's going to become a thing. So every time there's a legislative session, we're going to have a Capitol Fine Arts Day and just, continue to show the state why this is so important. Nothing better than seeing a bunch of kids in Midsummer Night's Dream costumes, just like walking down, the hallways outside the rotunda, just, precious, adorable chaos. But in the best way. It was very cool. It was an awesome day. So, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but is this organization like a voluntary
Yes.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
All volunteer, kind of a grassroots thing. Every one of us I don't even know what we call ourselves. The people that kind of run it, we're all either fine arts directors or teachers. And so we just kind of volunteer our time and sometimes our resources to make it happen because we know it's important. We have 2 lobbyists that, they lobby for TMEA, but they help us for TAEC as well. And it's a labor of love. And so it's, all volunteer. So, all of us sitting at the booth are there because we believe in it, and we know that the work is important.
Yeah. So I'm sure that was something really interesting that really caught my eye about you was seeing how involved with the legislative session that it's a whole nother world.
It is.
Aside from, of course, being a fine arts director, but getting involved with the House and the Senate, it's a whole nother ballgame. Mm-hmm. And so from an activism perspective, but also learning the ins and outs of, I guess, if you want to call it politics.
Yeah.
What was that process like? Because obviously you show that you're very passionate about the kids and wanting to do the best for your district, but wanting that impact to spread to statewide.
Yeah.
Where did that drive come from, and how were you able to learn all of this stuff about what it takes to be a part of the legislative session?
That's wow. Well, I'm still, as with all of it, I'm still learning as I go. Actually, it was funny. I was at a state board meeting a couple months ago, and State Board of Education, and somebody said, do you know how this works? And I said, truthfully, no, I don't. I'm still learning, but I'm still going to tell you, what I think, what it was best for the students of Texas. But I think what inspired me to get involved, I was in East Texas, and there are a lot of very small school districts that don't have a whole lot of resources. And I was seeing, that there was a little bit of a disparity between what some school districts could provide and what others could. And that's not fair. Every kid it should be able to have these opportunities that the kids in other zip codes do, Mm-hmm. And I had a talk, actually I was in Austin. I can't even remember what I was testifying for at that point, but I was in Austin and I stopped at a coffee shop and was getting coffee on my way to the Capitol, and the barista, he was precious. He liked my jacket or something. And he said, "What are you here for?" And I told him. He said, "Oh, that's amazing. I grew up in XYZ. I can't remember what city it was, but it was a small city or town, I guess." And he said, "I always wanted to be a theater kid, but there was not theater in my school district. So I did art instead, and I loved it. Art was great. But if I could have had the chance to do theater, I think my whole life would have been different." And so I was just like, oh my gosh, what if this was, Jamie Foxx, and didn't have that opportunity. And so that really kind of drove me, to go and fight for it, because I do think that, every kid should have a chance to try these things and to flex these muscles. So as far as learning the process, it is different. That world functions so much differently than education does. They're not nearly as structured time-wise as we are. So if you're at the Capitol, you're kind of on the Capitol's schedule and whatever they,
Yeah.
But yeah, learning the legislative process, I paid really, really good attention in 12th grade government, but it's been a while. No, but no, my government teacher would be very proud that I know the process of a bill now. But yeah, I ask a lot of questions, and I think that the fact that, I didn't grow up in Texas, and sometimes I can get away with asking silly questions like, "Hey, I'm new here. How does this work?"
Yeah.
And so our lobbyists and the people that have been doing this longer than I have always been very patient, and they explain things to me. And then what I like to do is make it that whole process, because it does seem really complicated and different and, just not something we're used to. I try to make it as accessible as possible to the people that I'm, explaining it to. So if you come by the booth and you ask me, how does a bill work? I have probably the most simple way to explain it to you that feels, because it was the way I wrapped my head around it, right? So I made it more accessible to other people too. But I'm constantly learning, and I just ask lots of questions, and sometimes I stumble. But it has been really fun to learn that process. And when I'm walking around the Capitol, and it just feels cool. It just feels, it just feels like, oh man, I'm doing a thing,
Yeah.
But it's been a really fun thing to learn, and it's really important that we are there, because a lot of times these decisions are being made by people who don't know anything about education, or especially not fine arts education. And so we've got to be there. We've got to be present. We've got to make sure that, if there's a question, an expert is answering it. And that's why, like Mr. Floyd, I just adore Bob Floyd. He has been the Capitol's resource on music education, but also fine arts education for over 30 years. And just the work that he's done to get us to where we are is incredible. His legacy is amazing. And so I'm excited that I get to be a little tiny part of helping him to continue that. But yeah, it's a whole other world, but it's cool. Yeah, it's really neat.
Yeah. I mean, that's so cool to be able to walk in the, Texas state capitol, but also to truly be making change. Like, I think that's really cool. And something that was really eye opening for me was not realizing how extensive, this process can be. Cause like from a band student myself, I'm like, oh, I'm just in band, and, school board makes decisions or whatever. But I think actually one of the first times when I realized that it involved more than just your school was, I don't remember what year it was, but I remember on the news there being shown that the fine arts were at risk for like budget cuts. I don't remember if it was just Texas or like nationwide, but I remember it being like a huge thing on the news, and there being a lot of awareness about it, and then spreading more awareness about why the fine arts is important. And even my favorite show at the time, Glee, had made an episode about something related to that at the time. And so just realizing that it takes a lot of effort, truly, not only from an advocacy point, but also involving like the government and creating bills for these kinds of things. It's been really, really cool to be able to understand that there's so much more that goes behind it.
Oh yeah. And we sit on the shoulders of giants. There are people that have gone before us that have really made these strides, and now we're just kind of refining the amazingness that they have done nationwide, also and here in Texas. And I think the fact that we have such a strong, advocacy base here in Texas is the reason that Texas is the leader in a lot of the, music education, fine arts education. And so, it's when you understand the gravity of whatever happens in Texas may influence what's happening elsewhere. Sometimes you think you might be fighting for the whole nation, you might be fighting for fine arts in general. And so, it is a huge, like I said earlier, a huge labor of love. And, I'm just so humbled that I get to be a little part of it.
Yeah, that's really, really great. And that's a great transition to kind of what I was going to ask you next, was not only as a fine arts director, but in someone being involved with the government, it's increasing that the number of women in leadership is increasing over time, but it's still a thing where it's kind of happening at a very slow rate. And so going back to, originally meeting you at Women in Leadership session and advocating for women in leadership, why do you think it's so important to advocate for women in leadership?
Well, we make up half the population, and so half of our leaders should also be women. And I think it's important. So I did a lot of research in my master's degree, and I'm really passionate about mentoring and having a mentors, or being a mentor to someone. When you can see yourself in somebody that's doing something you want to do, that makes you feel more empowered to be able to do it. And so I think it's important that we have representation of women and all kinds of women, not just women that can walk and talk like the guys, but also are like really feminine women, and just so that every young woman can see themselves in a leader, right? And realize that they too can do it, and that their voice matters big time. If we as women aren't using our voices and we're not, sharing our perspective as a woman, then decisions are going to be made that may affect us in less than desirable ways, right? And so I think one thing that is really important, so I brought this up in that Women in Leadership session. A really good friend of mine from Florida State, she's the athletic band director at Oklahoma State University, Devin Moore. She's amazing, a queen. She asked this question in a session she did at Midwest a couple years ago about, like, when did you know that your voice mattered? And I think for women, a lot of times it takes us a while to realize that what we think and what we say, and it matters, and people need to hear our opinion. A lot of times we just kind of go with the flow, right? And we're people pleasers, and that's just kind of the little niche that society has put us in. But it's important that we speak up, and it's important that we seek these leadership roles because other women need us, and the men need us too. They need to know that perspective. Because it rounds everything out. It makes everything more, more depth, more, just aware and well-rounded. So yeah, I definitely think it's important that we're there. And again, like I said, if the 50% of the population is women, then 50% of our leaders should be women.
Yeah. And I know you said that, especially stepping into your fine arts director role, you felt that it was luck, but you've been able to put yourself in so many different positions, especially with like the advocacy side and the TAEC side. So what advice would you give women who want to potentially seek a leadership role?
I would say be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. I think, and I learned that in teaching first. I love my high school band director. I have Alfred Watkins. Just a giant, right? I was a very lucky girl. But when I first got into the classroom, I tried to teach like him. Well, I'm not Alfred Watkins. I can't teach like him. I can't say the things he said in the same way because that's not me. That's him. And as much as it had an effect on me, it was the kids could see straight through it, right? They knew you're putting something on, and that's not you. And so when I started to just be more of myself, I started to be Paulette. I started to have more success in the classroom because it was coming from a genuine place. And so in leadership, all of these things, like I've always, it's easy to try to say what you think people want to hear, right? Or fit this mold that you think is the leader. You really just need to be yourself. You need to come at any sort of, leadership position that you seek and just be your genuine self, because that's your superpower, right? I'm, goofy and I'm, not afraid to say I don't know something. And that's my superpower, is because I can ask and I don't feel embarrassed. I don't feel like I have to have all the answers because I can just ask somebody smarter than me. And so using that identity of yourself as your superpower that's crucial. And so that would be my first piece of advice. My second piece would be, there's never like the right time. I'm young for a fine arts director. And if I would have written myself off because I was only 29 when that opening came up in Nacogdoches, then I wouldn't be where I'm sitting right now. I just took the leap of faith, and there's never a right time. So if it's something you want to do and you've got the qualifications, just do it. It's okay. Put your name in, try it, learn as you go. Because we need you. We need people that are passionate. We need people that are, dedicated to our kids and dedicated to making a good future for our kids. So I also think that surrounding yourself with people who clap for you, that's something else I talked about at that Women in Leadership position or session. And same professor with the phenomenological, Cliff Madsen at Florida State University. Any FSU music ed grad will go, oh yeah, Dr. Madsen, because there are things that we learn in his class that we just think about every day. But the people who clap for you are, if you imagine your best performance or the thing that you're the most proud of, right, that happened to you. And if there were an audience in front of you of thousands of people, and they're all applauding. The face that you look for in that crowd, that's the person that claps for you, or the people that clap for you. And so it's the people that, are in your corner, that are supporting you for the right reasons. And so surrounding yourself with people who clap for you, men or women, and having that support system and being okay with sharing and being vulnerable with those people when you fail or when you feel nervous, or, if you want to bounce something off of them, hey, I think I'm about to do this, but can you tell me if I'm going to be like stepping in it, and finding that like inner circle, I think is really important, and having that support system, and they're out there, there are people there. And if you don't have somebody that claps for you, I will clap for you. So, reach out, and I'll be your cheerleader and your best friend. But, I think that a lot of people wait till they're ready. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just, I would never get that. Or, oh, that's going to go to that band guy, or, just put your name out there. If you're interested, jump in, try it, get involved. There is a really awesome, and I hope she's okay, I'm sure she will be, Rachel Childers. She's an elementary music teacher right now, but she really wants to be a fine arts administrator. And she has just immersed herself in everything fine arts administration, even though she doesn't have the job title yet. So she's covering for me at the TAEC booth right now, and I just think it's amazing. She's jumped in, and she's like, this is something I want to do. This is something I'm energized about, and so I'm just going to immerse myself in it. And she's so brave. It's really cool. So she's like, already part of our organization, and she's not even a fine arts administrator yet, but I do know that eventually she will be, because she's got that drive and that passion. So yeah, get involved, talk to people. We're the nicest, most inclusive group of people. Like I said, when I got that fine arts administration job and I walked into my first fine arts administrators meeting, I had found my people. It's a group, and it's growing, and it's awesome. So yeah, do it. That's my advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, do it.
And especially, like you mentioned a good point about taking that initiative.
Yeah.
I that is something that I do every day, and that like almost like a motto that I live for every day is the whole reason why Fem Forte is happening, the whole reason why I get this really unique opportunities, just because I know there is a chance of someone saying no, but I never want to live my life without any regrets of not even trying to take that chance.
Right. Yeah. Because the thing is we need all of the perspective, and nothing that if it's important to you, it's important. Right. And you should share it. And if it's something that you feel passionate about, then we need it. Like, I think Fem Forte, this is awesome. And I've, been watching you on social media ever since we talked a year ago, and just like seeing what you're doing here. Like, this is amazing, because this is, empowering the women that are listening, and the men that are listening, the men that love the women. It's just, it's awesome that you took this leap, and this leap of faith, and have created this beautiful thing for us, this resource for us. And I hope that lots more women, if you've got an idea and if you've got something you think is going to make our world better, do it, because it will, it will make our world better.
Wow. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. We're just about to wrap up here, and I have 2 or 3 questions for you. The first being, what does success mean to you?
Ooh, okay. I think success looks different for everybody. I don't think there's like a formula for it. I think it just kind of depends on who you are. But I think one thing I live by is I try to be better every day. So even if it's just 1% better every day, better than I was yesterday, that's kind of my motto for success. And so I think that if I can go to bed at night knowing that I did one thing, even if it's just I got up 5 minutes earlier, I don't know, and I've done one thing to better the world for myself and my, fellow travelers, then I've been successful. I think too often we think it's in accolades and degrees and your paycheck and all that stuff. But if you're making the world better for somebody, even if it's just 1% better, that's success.
Amazing. The second question is kind of a 2-parter, is who do you want to be and what experiences do you want to create, whether it's for yourself or others?
I want to be someone that people are comfortable with, and people feel that I'm coming from a genuine place, and that I'm going to have your back, and that I'm just your cheerleader, right? I like to to pump people up and I like to support. And I think that's why I love being a fine arts administrator, is because that's exactly that. It's a support role. I just want to be somebody that when you think back on your time with me, that, I made you feel comfortable and I made you feel welcome and I made you feel seen. And then what was the second part of the question?
The other part of the question was, what experiences do you want to create?
Oh, okay. I guess that kind of goes in the same. I just want to create genuine, fulfilling experiences for people and for myself. I just want to, we have this one short life to live, and I want to make sure that every day, I soak all the life out of it I can. But then, also take time to be reflective and quiet and rest. But yeah, I want to create warm, inclusive experiences where everybody around me feels seen and valued for who they are, and, exactly who they are, not who they're pretending to be, but the person that's sitting right in front of me, is seen and knows that they're important.
Yeah, absolutely. And last but not least question is, knowing the knowledge you have now, what advice would you have told your younger self? Whether it was you stepping into the director of fine arts for the first time, whether it was you picking up your instrument for the first time, whether it was you even trying to be an advocate for fine arts or be at the Texas State Capitol for the first time.
I probably would tell her to buckle up, because one, it's all going to be okay. Because there were times when I'm very hard on myself, and it's just who I am. The minute something goes wrong, I look in the mirror first, right? And so I would tell her, hey, you're smarter than you think you are. You're more powerful than you think you are. You're nicer than you think you are. You're kinder than you think you are, and it's all going to be okay. You're everything's going to be fine. You are, even though you were second chair flute all through high school, you're still pretty good at it, and you are going to make a difference. You are going to be, you're going to have the life that you've always wanted. It's not going to look like what you thought it was going to be, because I was like, I'm going to take a band to Midwest and I'm going to have a band march in the Rose Parade and, all this stuff. But I might now, but it won't be my band. I'll go with one of my teachers. And that makes me even more excited. And just have faith and I would tell her to keep taking chances and put yourself out there and maybe not be so shy right at the beginning. Cause man, my first year teaching, I was like, okay, I made the wrong choice here. This is wrong. I was not cut out for this. Maybe I need to go back and get a different degree. No, I would have told her, no, keep going. You're fine. You're okay. It's going to be fine. You will not believe where you're going to be in 15 years. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again for being on the show. Where can our listeners and viewers find you, whether it's any social media or any organizations that you want to plug?
Sure. Well, I run the TAEC social media, so you can follow us there. Texas Arts Education Campaign, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I have personal Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Had to think about it for a second. Oh, I guess it's X now.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. I'm still going to call it Twitter. And then Tomball ISD, anything fine arts, Tomball ISD. You can kind of catch out what we're doing there, and that's my baby, my favorite thing. So, and I'm going to be at booth 1625 for the rest of TMEA, and you can come say hey to me there. But yeah, email me. I'll give you my card so you can post things and people can send me emails if they want to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm so honored. And on this special day for you, happy 1 year.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And I've been really looking forward to this. So I'm excited that we finally made it happen. And I just think that you're amazing and hope you keep doing what you're doing, because we need people like you. So
thank you. Yeah. Thanks for listening to Fem Forte. Fem Forte is produced and hosted by me, Amanda DeFries. Music is by Humans Win. To learn more about our guests, sponsors, and to get more resources, go to femfortepodcast.com and follow us on social media at Fem Forte Podcast.